what's happening? I hope you're all well. So this is the preview for Gennady Golovkin versus Murata. Now this is a good fight, and it's a fight that perhaps if this was Gennady Golovkin back in 2016 or 2017, that Gennady Golovkin would be, very, very likely to go in there and get it done quickly. However, Gennady Golovkin has shown indications that he is slowing down. He is 40 years old and he hasn't looked the same, I'd say, from the second Canelo fight, to be honest with you. I'd say that there were indications in the second Canelo fight that he was slowing down. So, Gennady Golovkin slowing down, and Murata, he is a solid campaigner. Murata won the Olympics in 2012 against Falcao, and Murata is a tall middleweight. He is listed at 6 foot, and he likes to actually not normally take advantage of that. He likes to walk his opponents down. A bit like Dominic Brazil. However, he is technically more refined than Dominic Brazil. So Murata is going to be right there for Gennady Golovkin. Now, Golovkin has recently struggled. Steve Rolls was having his success, and Derevianchenko was also having his success. And I forgot the guy's name who he recently just fought. Camille Cesar, see if I can pronounce his name. Cesar Meta. And he actually, he won that one easily, but that was a fight where there was clearly a gap in class. So, but against Steve Rolls, I know Steve Rolls is not like a top campaigner, but Steve Rolls has amateur background, and Steve Rolls was having success against Gennady Golovkin, and so was Derevianchenko. Derevianchenko, I thought he won that fight. I remember thinking he won that fight. So, and I think a lot of people thought Derevianchenko won that fight. So, and Gennady Golovkin was hurt in that fight as well. So, this is an interesting fight because if Gennady Golovkin was getting hurt against Derevianchenko, possibly losing against Derevianchenko, struggling a bit against Steve Rolls, is he going to be better now than he was back then? Probably not. And Murata, he is 36 years old. 36 years old, so he's not young. And has, I think if I look at the box rec of these guys, Gennady Golovkin's had, 43 fights, and Murata has had 18 fights. So Murata's had less fights than Gennady Golovkin, and maybe that means he's taken less punishment. Let's see. I think that Gennady Golovkin, if he's going to win this fight, it's going to be based on the fact that Murata's going to be right in front of him, and Murata is not going to be able to take the power of Gennady Golovkin, because even though he's older, he's still going to have that punch power, Gennady Golovkin. Gennady Golovkin is a very heavy-handed guy. So, is Gennady Golovkin's punch power going to be too much for Murata? Can Murata hurt Gennady Golovkin? That's the question, because Derevianchenko, not the biggest puncher. I know it was to the body, not the biggest puncher, Derevianchenko. He's quick, but he's not the biggest puncher. I mean, if you look at Derevianchenko versus... Which Charlo brother was it that Derevianchenko fought? Derevianchenko, because he lost to one of the... He fought Jamal Charlo, and he lost that one decisively. And he also went and fought Carlos Adames, and he lost that fight as well. And so Derevianchenko on a 3-loss streak, although possibly being Gennady Golovkin, maybe that should be a 2-loss streak. But either way, Derevianchenko is not the biggest puncher, but he hurt Gennady Golovkin. If I even look at Derevianchenko, 10 knockouts in 13 fights, but looking at him, I don't think he's the biggest puncher out there. So, but he was able to hurt Gennady Golovkin. And Gennady Golovkin is known for having good punch resistance. You know, known for having good punch resistance. But as you get older, you know, unless you're like one of these fighters who just has real good punch resistance, you know, your punch resistance is going to go down a lot of the time. A lot of fighters are going to lose their punch resistance as they get older. So Gennady Golovkin, can he stand in the middle of the ring and slug it out with a guy who has punch power like Murata? Murata has punch power. Murata can, Murata can punch. So I think this fight could be really exciting. I think this fight could be really exciting. I think that this could be almost like a stand in the middle of the ring, and who can knock who out first. Because Gennady Golovkin likes to get on that front foot. He likes to. He does work off the jab. He likes to use the jab. He likes to set up his power punches, and he hits hard. Whereas Murata, he's a tall guy that doesn't use his height, who likes to walk his opponents down, and he likes to land those power punches. So when you've got two fighters like that, it could really be an exciting fight. Of course, their styles could clash, but, it could also be a very, very exciting fight. So, and in that type of fight, very often it's going to be who can knock who out, who can take the other person's power, who can knock the other guy out. Unless, of course, Gennady Golovkin. I've seen Gennady Golovkin. He can box. He boxed in the second fight against Canelo. And I have seen Gennady Golovkin, box against David Lemieux. He boxed. So it's not, impossible that Gennady Golovkin might think, you know what, I can win this on my boxing. So I'm just going to, stick a jab and set up the right hand, maybe on the back foot. It's not impossible that happens. So when I look at these two, I look at the fact that, Gennady Golovkin is a power puncher that can box. I look at the fact that Murata he's not got the best maybe skill, but he slugs it out and he's got power. When I look at these two and I look at potential for winning, you would say that Gennady Golovkin looks like it's more likely that he's going to win this fight. I mean, Gennady Golovkin, let's see, Murata, he last fought in 2019. It's 2022 now. And if you're looking at Gennady Golovkin, he last fought, I know it was against that Polish fighter who's not very good, but he last fought in 2020, the end of 2020. So Gennady Golovkin has been out more. Check this on my phone. So Gennady Golovkin has been out more, and Gennady Golovkin has had more fights, more experience, fought at a higher level. And Gennady Golovkin, his power may be more proven than Murata. So when I look at it, I think Gennady Golovkin is, maybe a bit more likely to win this fight, but there are some unknowns in this fight. One, the fight's happening in Japan. If you look at something quite interesting here, if you look at Murata, one of his defeats came against Rob Brandt, and he lost that fight in the USA. However, when the rematch took place in Japan, which is where Murata's from, he knocked the guy out in the second round. So Murata possibly performs better in Japan. I mean, if you look, he lost to Endam. He lost that one in Japan, and then he got the win in Japan. Fair enough. Either way, it may be the case that he performed better in Japan. It may be the case that if this was happening in the USA, that Gennady Golovkin may actually had been an advantage. Whereas because this is happening in Japan, this may play into the hands of Murata. So the unknowns are, how is Gennady Golovkin going to perform in Japan? I'm not too worried about that because, he's from Kazakhstan and he's performed in many other countries. But I'm saying, how's Murata going to perform in Japan? I'm looking at Gennady Golovkin's punch resistance since he was hurt against Derevianchenko. I'm looking at how much has Gennady Golovkin's speed decreased with age. how much has his reflexes decreased with age, and maybe his stamina. And I'm looking at Murata here at 36, thinking, 36 isn't young, so maybe Murata's thinking he needs to get a good win and get a big fight. He needs to go in there and get a big fight. So I'm looking at all these things, and I would say Gennady Golovkin is more likely to win this fight. I think he's more likely to win this fight. And the fact that Murata's never been knocked out before, that also, it means you need to ask yourself, if Murata has the chin and Gennady Golovkin's quite old now and he hasn't got the stamina, could Gennady Golovkin gas out? So I'm looking at all these things, and when I look at all of it, I think Gennady Golovkin's most likely going to win this fight. But I'm not saying that with confidence, because Murata, Olympic gold medal, he has experience, he's fighting in Japan, he's the younger of the two, and he himself can punch, 30 knockouts and 16 wins, so he can punch. And Gennady Golovkin is getting older, so Gennady Golovkin more likely to win this fight. I would say probably by knockout, because at the end of the day, Murata is going to stand. I think Murata's going to stand in front of Gennady Golovkin, and I think anyone that stands in front of Gennady Golovkin is giving him an opportunity. Gennady Golovkin punches very hard, so I think Gennady Golovkin most likely to win. Who do you think is going to win this fight? Is this fight coming at the right time for Murata? Is this coming at the right time for Murata? And has Gennady Golovkin got enough left here to get the win? I hear that Canelo is possibly a fight that's going to be made, if Gennady Golovkin gets through this fight. At this point, I'm not convinced that Gennady Golovkin, I wouldn't even say that would be a really competitive fight. The first two fights were very competitive. Very competitive. Whether you thought who won what, I think Gennady Golovkin won at least one of those fights, to be honest with you. Either way, no matter what you think about those two fights, I can't see Gennady Golovkin being even... I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't even that competitive, if I'm being honest with you. And I wouldn't be surprised if Canelo knocked him out. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. But back to this fight, I think Gennady Golovkin should get through this fight. But where he goes from, even if he wins, I don't think there is much that Gennady Golovkin can do now as compared to before. I think it's a real shame. I think it's a shame that Gennady Golovkin didn't get that third Canelo fight on the back of the second one. I think it's a shame that Gennady Golovkin hasn't had the opportunity to fight, the Charlo brothers. I think it's a shame that Gennady Golovkin hasn't done more when he was better, as opposed to now, because it's going to be a real shame if Gennady Golovkin loses to Murata or beats Murata, gets knocked out by Canelo, loses to one of the Charlo brothers, and any of the other middleweights that are out there, and he starts picking up losses when these guys maybe weren't trying to fight him when he was at his best. That'd be a real shame to me. But either way, what do you think of this fight? Who do you think is going to win? And where do you think, that's pretty much what I'm saying, man. Who do you think is going to win? Let me know why you think the person is going to win, and put it in the comment section. So like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and I'll see you on the next video. What's happening, people? Subscribe to my boxing channel for fight footage, training footage, client footage, and more. You'll find boxing tips that you can apply to your own training. So subscribe to my boxing channel. The link is in the description.